Welcome to the December meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. Thank you for your attendance today. Thank you everybody for coming in this hectic time. Before beginning, on behalf of the board and the staff, I'd like to welcome our new mayor, Chris Stanley, to our meeting. Thank you for coming to go through some of these things. We look forward to working with you. She has had a chance to review. A final agenda has been provided to you today. The meeting materials were previously emailed and have been printed. The meeting calendar and also have been provided in the supplemental folder that you received. We will also consider 4 items recommended for approval by the governance committee today. As is our normal practice, we will hold time at the end of the meeting for the privilege of the floor of any individual to speak. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? I will ask the executive director to take a roll call of the directors. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I missed the minutes. So motion to approve the minutes from September 23rd, 2024.
Here.
Okay. Seconded. All right. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor of business is to approve the minutes of the BFSA 2024 September 23rd board meeting. Directors will find a draft of those minutes and the accompanying resolution in your board book on this tab too. Is to approve the BFSA's 2025-2026 MWB goal plan and SDVOB goal plan in favor for the full board. A motion opposed? Motion passes. The minutes are approved. Second. Now, we have a resolution before us today. Honoring the contributions all those in favor say aye. Mayor Byron W. Brown. All right, to our organization. We thank Mayor Brown for his years of service. The next item for approval that we've already discussed is to read whereas on July 3rd, 2003, the New York State Governor signed into law Chapter 122 of the laws that we reviewed the list to be provided to BFSA by the City and Covered Organization Act, and the communication was updated due to the stability authority of the city's budget and the financial plan from May 1st, the City of Buffalo, and will be distributed to the City and Covered Organizations. And whereas Byron William Brown II was elected today, and I just need a motion to mayor of Buffalo and took office on January 1st, 2006, and concurrently served as questions or discussion director of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. And whereas during his tenure, Mayor Brown submitted 19 annual budgets. Our remaining item, 4-year annual financial plan. We are out of executive session. Significant steps. I will now make a motion to request and we did that organization. The committee has compiled the results Mayor Brown oversaw evaluation. Buffalo is there a motion to provide the compiled results and through the New York State Authority budget of its administration, the city emerged on a stable financial discussion, allowing the Buffalo, we have to do Fiscal Stability Authority to exit a control period and transition into an advisory period on July 1st. So a copy of the final compilation. And whereas Mayor Brown effectively led the city through significant economic challenges faced by the public sector due to the covariance to maybe discuss organizational issues, COVID pandemic, and decisively manage the allocation of unprecedented federal funds under the American Rescue Plan Act. And whereas Mayor Brown has been unwaveringly of the governance committee to promote the City of Buffalo and improve the quality of life of all of its residents, focusing on driving economic development, establishing the Northland Workforce Development Center, and countless initiatives to strengthen the community. And whereas Mayor Brown has also been tireless in his efforts to advance the mission of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority to restore long-term fiscal stability to the City of Buffalo and its covered organizations, and whereas Mayor Brown's innumerable contributions to the City of Buffalo will endure for generations, now therefore be it resolved that the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority does hereby honor and appreciate the Honorable Byron W. Brown for his outstanding contributions to the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, the City of Buffalo and its residents, and the West New York community. Can I have a motion to accept this resolution? So approved.
As moved.
Does anyone have any other comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The motion passes unanimously, and we're going to do our normal thing and put it all in a big picture and everything.
Yes, you will.
That's good. Thank you. I'm assuming we're doing the second. I have a second resolution to read for Commissioner Dowell, who has recently resigned. We want to thank the Commissioner for serving as Mayor Brown's proxy at our meetings and for his collaboration in working with us towards the same goal of financial stability. And I'll read our resolution. Whereas on July 3rd, 2003, the New York State Governor signed into law Chapter 122 of the laws of 2003, known as the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, which created the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority to assist in the restoration of fiscal stability in the City of Buffalo and within its covered organizations. And you got Mayor Brown there.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry,
No, it's okay.
everyone. Whereas the Honorable Byron W. Brown was sworn in as the City of Buffalo's 62nd mayor on January 1st, 2006, and whereas Mayor Brown announced the appointment of Delano Dowell as the City of Buffalo's Commissioner of Administrative Finance, Policy, and Urban Affairs in June 2022, noting his extraordinary qualifications to serve within his administration. And whereas the Buffalo Common Council unanimously approved Mr. Dowell's appointment on July 12th, 2022, and whereas Mr. Dowell previously served the City of Buffalo as Deputy Controller and Senior Special Assistant in the Department of Administration and Finance, and whereas in addition to his public sector roles, he has significant private sector experience, having managed all accounting and financial matters for over 50 United States military unit accounts, and whereas Mr. Dowell's distinguished career and extensive financial accounting and management experience provided an immeasurable asset in the performance of his duties as Commissioner, and whereas Mr. Dowell was designated to represent Mayor Byron W. Brown at meetings of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, and whereas Mr. Dowell worked diligently with the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority to develop a cooperative and collaborative approach to address the financial challenges facing the City of Buffalo, and whereas Mr. Dowell has announced his resignation as Commissioner of Finance, Administration Policy, and Urban Affairs effective December 16, 2024, and will continue to serve the public and the citizens of the City of Buffalo as Deputy City Controller, and whereas Mr. Dowell contributions to the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority and City of Buffalo and the community will endure and positively impact future generations. Now, be it resolved that the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority does hereby honor and appreciate Delano Dowell for his outstanding contribution to the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, the City of Buffalo and its residents, and the Western New York community. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, any comments? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge Commissioner Dahl and his commitment to the residents of the City of Buffalo and the tremendous work he's done, whether it be as a part of this organization, as the Commissioner of Administration and Finance, or as a previous employee. Nothing but the best.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and I just personally want to thank you for all the work you've done, particularly with me and everything else to get everything put together. We really do.
And I want to thank you for very open to me, great relationship with everyone on this board, and have a director conversation in regards to understanding responsibility for the Commission of Administration and Finance and representative of Mayor Brian Brown, and along with the responsibilities of the BFSA. And as I said, the numbers are what they are. We can change the tone of the message, how we deliver those numbers. I think just being able to work with each other, already having a common ground, just trying to make sure the city is able to provide the services to the citizens, and then fiscally responsible. I do want to thank this body and just being so helpful and open to us. And then, even though I'm even resigned from this position, I will continue to work with the school staff, deputy controller, and whatever information I have, I will share everything that you guys have. Same, but I think at the end of the day, we all want the same for our taxpayers and business. Thank you for the recognition.
Thank
You
you.
running for something?
And you're always welcome to come back and sit in on the meeting.
I will.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you. The Governance Committee met earlier today and has recommended board approval of the 2025 board meeting schedule, the 2025-2026 Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise Goal Plan, and the 2025-2026 Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Business Development Goal Plan, and the revised list of items to be provided to the BFSA by the city and covered organizations as provided under tab 1 of your board book. The accompanying draft resolution is located under tab 3. I will bring each item separately for a vote. May I have a motion to adopt the regular meeting schedule for the calendar of 2020?
Motion.
Okay, second?
Second.
Second, okay. Any discussion on the calendar? And obviously, if it has to change due to unforeseen circumstances, we will deal with that at the appropriate time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The calendar passes. May I have a motion to approve the 2025-2026 Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise Goal Plan? Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. May I have a motion to approve the 2025-2026 Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Business Development Goal Plan? Motion?
So moved.
Second? Okay. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. May I have a motion to approve the revised list of items to be provided to the BFSA by the city and covered organizations? Motion?
So moved.
Someone? Second? Okay. Any discussion on this? And this just puts us into compliance with Common Council moving dates into suit. So, hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passed. Good. Thank you, everybody, for those motions. We will move to our first City of Buffalo agenda item, the review of the final 2023-2024 operating results pursuant to the audited financial statements. These were submitted to the BFSA on November 26th. Principal Analyst Link, will you review for us this, Bryce?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the Board of Directors today. I'm going to apologize. I have 3 items back to back, so you're going to be hearing from me for quite a bit. But as Director Kloss indicated, I'll be beginning with a review of the city's financials. All right. While he was working on that, most of the directors have a copy of the statements in front of them. So the first slide we have is going to be a summary of statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So at year end, June 30th, 2024, total revenues were $593.8 million. Total expenditures were $608. Yes, there we go. As I was saying, total expenditures were $608.2 million, leading to a deficiency of revenues over expenditures of $14.5 million. Other financing sources that were utilized totaled $56.8 million. Other financing uses totaled $73.9 million, leading to a subtotal of negative $17.1 million. So the net change in fund balance at year end was $31.6 million. The schedule we have here compares the adopted budget, final budget number, and the actual, with a variance column for the difference between the final and actual budget. Actual revenues of $593.8 million exceeded the budget amount of $565.8 million by $28 million. Other financing sources were $56.8 million, a favorable variance of $2.5 million compared to the final budget amount of $54.3 million. Total revenue and other financing sources of $650.6 million, which is favorable to budget by $30.5 million. Now, total expenditures were $616.9 million with an unfavorable variance of $5.4 million compared to the final budget amount of $611.5 million. Other financing sources totaled $73.9 million and exceeded budget by $46.3 million. Total expenditures were $690.8 million, which was an unfavorable variance of $51.7 million compared to the final budget amount of $639.1 million. Now, the expenditures of $690.8 million exceeded revenues of $650.6 million for a deficit of $40.2 million. Fund balance was reduced from $149.4 million down to $109.2 million. Now, the next slide, we're going to look at the revenues and what the major variations were within the year.
Bryce, can I add a comment on your last slide? So just so everybody kind of knows what numbers we're talking about, the budgetary average so that's why there's a difference between the ending fund balance here and what you'll see in a couple more slides.
And those encumbrances at year end total $8.7 million. That's
correct.
That's what's hanging out in its own little account.
Yes.
You know, Bryce, I don't want to get ahead of you on this, but looking at that negative 46.3 million on the expenditure side. What do we attribute most of that to?
Large portion of that's going to be the ARPA dollars.
ARPA program.
ARPA program, because they were not part of the final budget amount.
All right.
So you may remember, and when we get into the city quarterly, you'll start seeing these variances, and a lot of it are those transfers out to the ARPA dollar, program dollars. And what happens is the city recognizes the revenue through the general fund, and then the expenditures as a transfer out.
Okay.
So that's part of the positive variance with revenues as well, right?
That is correct. Yeah. Brand new. So, anyways, moving on, that'll be page 4, the revenues. Federal aid, in excess was 44.1 million, and that was attributed in the ARPA program. Investment income was favorable by 15.9 million, and that was related to the investment in federal stimulus funds. Property taxes were unfavorable by 9.3 million, and there's 2 components to that. The city initially adopted a budget that included the use of 6 million of ARPA program funds for arrears. That was not implemented last year. That was rolled into this year's budget. And then the other part of that was 3.3 million in lower collections for fiscal year 20. Miscellaneous was unfavorable by 12.9 million. Largest component of that was a unfavorable variance of 5.9 million in grant reimbursement. Sale of property in the amount of 3.6 million did not occur, and then a miscellaneous line of 2.3 million that was unfavorable.
Bryce, will the grant, is that a timing issue grant, or is?
I am currently looking into that to determine what it was. It's a combination of grants. So is it just timing, or was there a change in the grant program? That is something that I'm turning my attention to. Moving on, state aid, or what flows through the state. When we say state aid, a lot of people automatically just assume state aid, but there are other components that get grouped in and rolled under the whole state aid umbrella. So the unfavorable variance of 7 million is attributed to unfavorable variance of 4.2 million in the tribal state compact revenue. Potentially timing-wise, as the compact expired, it's year to year, they're currently negotiating on that. And then the unfavorable variance budget to actuals of the cannabis sales tax in the amount of 3 million. Moving on to expenditures, significant variances include a negative, unfavorable variance of 17.9 million with the police department, and there's several factors rolling into it. A large component of that is attributed to the settlement with the Police Benevolent Association, which occurred in January of 2024. So about 6 months into the year, the city settled with the PBA, and they brought the contract, and the board reviewed it. Now, this contract did include 2 years of prior retroactive. The city did accrue for some of these, but not the full amount for both years. So you see that hit in fiscal year 24, as well as the compounding impact of the settlement of the contract into fiscal year 24, which increased the annual salaries, overtime, as well as the longevity. So some of the unfavorable variances include unfavorable variance of 1.9 million for the annual salary, duty disability at 3.1 million, overtime at 10.7 million, court time at 1.3 million, and longevity at 1 million. I am currently working with the comptroller's office to try and get a breakout of these variances and how much of that was really attributed to the retro, the 2 years of retro, to really clean that up. Specifically the overtime at 10.7 million. So we're
And
trying
the contract's going to be opening up then?
End of this year.
Yeah.
Correct. And I will, yes.
But these negatives, was this something that the administration never anticipated?
At the time that the contract was reviewed, resources were identified over the financial plan, we'll get into the weeds here a little bit discussing it. They were going to utilize a portion of the interest earned from the investment. They hit that number, but what didn't materialize are some of these other revenues. So when you're just looking at the general fund and it's a mix of different revenues, yes, the revenues they intended to use for the PVA materialized, but they were short in other areas, so the whole general fund took an impact as well. And going back to the first part of the question, it's really, I want to delineate the difference between what impacted fiscal year 24 and what was really those retro pieces for 2 years. Any other questions on the police? Other expenditures that were unfavorable, the fire department, this was attributed to overtime. Annual salary was actually favorable by $5.1 million, whereas unfavorable occurred with duty disability at $3.9 million and the overtime of $6.8 million. Encumbrances, $8.7 million, and then there is the all other $19.2 million. Now, we briefly touched upon it earlier, the ARPA program funds were unbudgeted, and so that's why they're shown up as unfavorable variance of $46.4 million. So at the end of the day, they're offset by the ARPA program revenue coming in through the general fund. So the next slide we have here compares fiscal year end 23 to fiscal year 24. Revenues increased year to year by $4.1 million. Other financing sources increased by $42.8 million. So year-end total revenue for fiscal year 24 was $650.6 million, an increase of $46.9 million compared to the $603.7 million from the year before. Major variations year to year. Federal stimulus actually decreased by $1.1 million. The tribal state compact casino revenue decreased by $700,000. And sales tax decreased by $300,000 year to year. Increases, year-to-year property taxes went up by $4.1 million. The interest earned was $7 million, and the largest component was the issuance of the bond for the legal settlement. And year-to-year, they increased by 42 points.
So Bryce, what are we attributing the property tax increase to? Is that
That was largely
just the valuation, or is it buildings coming off tax abatements and being now taxed? Do we know the split between those?
The year-to-year was, I don't have that
Right.
will be a component of it, but the larger driving force was the year-to-year change in the property tax rate.
Okay.
Right, can I ask a question? Do you know how much more we brought in by raising taxes, by voting?
I don't have those broken out. It's a combination of what Director Floss had mentioned, buildings coming online as well as the year-to-year increase. But I will,
But essentially here, the year-to-year change is basically the factor of the bond for the legal statement,
yes,
settlement and refund project.
that's correct. Now, this graph here is just a historical snapshot of the sales tax from the last 10 years, from fiscal year 2015, when it was at $79.3 million, up to the $111.8 million for fiscal year 24. Big driver there was the Wayfair decision a couple years ago, so that the online sales, local communities can really recapture those sales. Moving on to expenditures, what we have here is expenditures for fiscal year 24 totaled $608.2 million, which was an increase of $89 million compared to the prior year amount, $519.2. Other financing uses totaled $73.9 million, which was an increase of $13.8. So year to year, the total increase for total expenditures and other financing uses totaled $102.8 million, with fiscal year end at a total of $682.1 million. And significant pieces here include increased costs for public safety, both police and fire, at $25.3 million. There's some smaller components, public works that falls under that, but the largest is fire and police.
With the public safety, then that's the police contract and all of that includes?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. As well as, I was just saying, from the public safety,
Yeah.
snow removal.
It's not a $25 million increase, it's just yearly expenditure.
No.
It's police contract, the retro, all of that.
Everything, yep. Employee benefits increased by $16.3 million, couple of factors there. Some of that was attributed to the PBA contract, as well as increasing health insurance rates, particularly on the pharmacy side, pharmaceutical side. Increase in streets and sanitation of $3.3 million. You may remember there were 2 snowstorms back-to-back, beginning of January last year, that the city worked through. General government support increased by $1.8 million year-to-year. The other increased by $42.7 million, and that was really attributed to the legal settlement and the payout for that settlement. And then transfers out increased by $13.8 million for a total of $73.9 million. 10-year look backs on actual revenue compared to the final budget amount. You'll notice the last 4 years, actual revenue has actually exceeded the final budget amount. Part of that is attributed to the way the ARPA program funds flow through the budget. Prior to that, most years outside of 2014-15, actual revenues were below the final budget amount. Similar slide, we're looking at expenditures. You're going to see this past year, actual expenditures exceeded the final budget amount, as we were just discussing. Prior to this, most years, the last 9 years, actuals were below the final budget amount. And a large component of that, as was mentioned, is the ARPA program fund dollars, as well. This year was the impact of the PBA settlement. Now, we're going to move into a few slides of fund balance. We broke it down into different components just to review. So the first slide is total fund balance. We have non-spendable restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. So year to year, there was a decrease of $31.6 million in total fund balance. Significant decreases on unassigned decreased by $14.9 million, assigned decreased by $30.6. The committed increased by $7.4. Committed reflects the rainy day fund, and then the non-spendable restricted increased by $6.5. The non-spendable restricted can be broken down in these following buckets. You'll see the increase year to year is $6.5 million. Real estate acquired for resale decreased by $200,000, pretty stable year to year. Due from the refuse fund increased by $4 million. And now that $3.4 million. Prepaids were flat year to year. Capital outlay increased by $2.7 million, and emergency medical services flat year. Now, this is the committed fund balance this year, ending June 30th, 2024, total $50.7 million. Committed fund balance is subject to a purpose constraint imposed by Common Council. Balance is $50.7 million for the emergency stabilization, equal to 30 days of prior year's total general fund operating expenditure, but it excludes other financing sources, uses, so that'd be your transfers out large. And then it's intended for extraordinary operating or capital needs that could not be anticipated and cannot be funded with the current budget resources. Now, if the city does draw on it, they do have to include the replenishment in the following year's budget. So they can use it for acting council, but they do have to pay it back within, I want to say, 3 years.
Frank, if you could go to, on slide 3, you have your budgetary.
1092.
Yeah, 1092, and then it's 117.8. What accounts for that $9 million?
Encumbered.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what it is? Okay. Great, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. No, I did the same thing. I put these slides together and I look back at them. Yeah. Okay, moving on to assigned, and speaking of encumbrances, starting off with that.
And then I fell into the trap.
Yeah.
Year to year, it decreased by 10 million. Motor vehicle insurance is budgeted, or zero. Subsequent years expenditures at 3.6, and then judgment zero. So year to year, there's a decrease of 30.5 million in the assigned fund balance. Now, this chart's a little busy. Well, all it really does is two main lines. You have the black line, which shows the total fund balance going back to fiscal year 23, when it was down to 36 million. Now it's down to 100, or up to 117.8 million. And then the orange line, which is the unrestricted fund balance, that's the line that would include the unassigned, the assigned, that would be called on first if necessary. So that goes from 26.7 million fiscal year 23 to 63 million year end. What we have here is the total other post-employment benefits liability, OPEB, going back to fiscal year 2006. Fiscal year, or July 1st, 2010, that was the highest year of measurement at 1.6 billion. Since then, it's decreased by almost 29% down to 1 billion. But going back to fiscal year, or July 1, 2006, it's actually increased from 946 million to 1.2 billion. Currently unfunded.
Well, and I'll do my normal comment on OPEBs and looking out 75 years into the future. And just to warn everybody that we'll see this go down as interest rates go up. So therefore, you'll get these dramatic changes in these. These are not expenditures that are going to be owed next year or the year after, and that we need to be careful not to overemphasize this. This is an important planning tool, but that's all it is a planning tool, and it shouldn't be meant to, make serious decisions on.
Thank you. Next slide here goes back to fiscal year 2008, and it looks at the solid and recycling fund and the annual operating income and loss. Over this almost 16-year period, there was really only 3 years of operating income, and that was right after the city increased the collection fees, trash fees in fiscal year 2019. You can see the increase for operating income from 1.5. Subsequently, they've been operating in a operating deficit loss the following 3 years. This operating loss, our next schedule, where we look at the general fund long-term receivable, this is part of that non-spendable in the fund balance. And as you can see, it's increased up to 23.4 million as of June 30th, 24. So it was a $4 million year-to-year increase. So this has been in the general fund non-spendable going back before fiscal year 2008. And that brings me to the end of the financial statements presentation.
Are there any questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll move to review the first quarter submission by the city. A copy of the BFSA analysis is included under tab 4 of your board book, and an accompanying resolution has been provided to you in your addendum folder. Bryce Link and Executive Director Rowe will discuss this item. You're back on.
Thank you, Nathan. Review of the city's first quarter report. So the adopted budget revenues and expenditures totaled $617.2 million. At the end of the first quarter, the city is actually projecting a year-end deficit of $17.7 million. So that is an unfavorable variance of $14.7 million within the revenues and use of fund balance. for a total of $602.5 million. And there's an unfavorable variance of $3 million in expenditures, which increased expenditures to $620.2 million. So this projected deficit is approximately 2.9%. We did schedule a breakdown of the revenues comparing the adopted budget to the first quarter's year-end projections. The city did adopt a budget they included $14.9 million of assigned fund balance. However, per the audited June 30th, 24 financial statement, only $3.6 million is available. The city's quarterly report did not reflect the use of the $3.6 million. They removed the $14.9 in total. So that is the largest component of the negative variance, unfavorable variance I mentioned within the revenues. Other
Can
variants,
you say anything about the tax estimates?
yes, I will.
Okay.
So high level, just a couple of other unfavorable variances. You had the $4.2 million in taxes, unfavorable 2.7 in fines, unfavorable of 2.3 in service charges, which is offset by a favorable variance of 9.5 under intergovernmental revenue. So I'll come back to that one. So really addressing Director Foss' question is the 14.7 variance and what's driving it. I already mentioned the 14.9 unfavorable variance in fund balance. The 4.2 million unfavorable variance in taxes is really related to the occupancy tax. Now, that was included as part of the adopted budget, takes an act of the state legislature, which has not occurred. So that's what that 4.12 million is. The 2.6 million unfavorable variance in fines is due to lower collections last year, or projected in the current year. The unfavorable variance of 2.3 million in service charges. The adopted budget included new parking rates and fees. Those were not approved by council, so the original assumptions did not hold true. They have to move forward. Now, the 9.5 million favorable variance in intergovernmental, that's due to two major components. The first one being a unbudgeted ARPA program funds of $10 million, and then a unfavorable variance of $500,000 for the cannabis tax. That was the summary on the revenue. Stack of slides. Expenditures. There's an unfavorable variance of $3 million projected, and that can be broken down into three components. Total departmental is actually projected to be favorable at year-end at $700,000. However, police and fire are projected to be unfavorable. The remaining 13 departments is really making up that difference for favorable variance. Going down to total general charges, favorable variance of $6.3 million. That's being driven by fringe benefits of 2.7, other of 2.6, and then a combination of personal services and utilities for the last $1 million there.
Bryce?
Right.
Go ahead.
Bryce, the favorable variances that are shown here amongst the rest of the departments, is that based on vacancy control or?
Largely vacancy, that is correct.
Largely vacancy, or retirements or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the city of Buffalo, their largest expenditure is personal services.
Personal service, okay.
They are in the business of working with people, providing services to the city.
So based on this chart here, it appears as though the rest of the departments are operating very prudently.
Correct.
Right, so do these, essentially, these vacancy savings, it assumes that every vacancy that exists right now is gonna remain vacant for the rest of the year? Is that how you're
It's
deriving it?
blended, it's blended. Some of them, they recognize and they know they'll be there. Others, they are trying to fill, especially if it's a revenue-generating position. So, holding all things constant, if they maintain those vacancies from September 30th to December 31st, you'd see an increase in their contract.
And I would tell you this, operationally, that's been the conversation we've had internally. Unless it is absolutely revenue generating or absolutely essential, you're gonna be awfully hard pressed to get a job approved now because of the $17 million right now. Yeah, the way, I'm just looking at it, 1 quarter into the year, it's really tough to project full-year vacancy savings. So there's a lot of assumptions going in.
Yeah, but we're gonna try to stick to that as much as humanly possible.
Mayor, can I ask a question? Okay, based on what you just said, though, that none of the vacancies are to be filled, what does that do to the vacancies that are currently in police and fire right now?
Well, police and fire, we're never fully staffed in police and fire. There's constantly retirements, things of that nature, so we're never completely staffed. There's a class that's scheduled to go on, January for police. We are not putting that on.
Okay.
To save over $1 million.
Not that you have this information, but the way we have vacancies in police and fire, what do we do about public safety?
Why, if you
Is
talk,
there
if
a
you,
concern, is there a concern about the public safety based on?
no, if you talk,
fully staffed in police and fire. There's constantly retired, things of that nature, so we're never busy. There's a class that's scheduled.
All right.
no, if you talk to the commissioners,
Okay,
they're comfortable with their staffing levels right now.
okay,
Not much pushback on the decision with the police class in January.
okay.
Because those, they budget for those certain number of, police officers or members of the fire department, but they're never fully staffed.
Okay.
Bryce, comparing, I mean, traditionally, we have an unfavorable in police and fire at the end of the first quarter. How does this year respond to the last couple of years of the unfavorable? If we go back, is it about the same?
It is slightly higher. And part of that is they actually have more personnel than they do normally at the end of the first quarter. They have brought on some classes this past year. There's technically 2 police recruit classes. One's currently in the academy, the other's out in the field doing their, I'm blanking on the name, but they're working with the senior officer. Yeah, so technically 2 classes, so once the field officer training's over, they'll be able to be deployed on their own and work in that capacity.
Bruce, I had one other question, just back to the fund balance. Where is this 3.6 million in the available?
It's actually part of the 12.3 assigned, so when you look at it's not broken out there, but the assigned of 12.3 is actually 2 components. 8.7 million is for the encumbrances, the other 3.6 is what was mentioned. The city administration has not designated that 3.6 or anything. This kind of came out, I mean, financial statements were released in November, so.
If they haven't designated it for anything, wouldn't it be unassigned?
It's designated for subsequent reasons.
Okay, I was just trying to find where that fit into all of this. Okay, thank you.
Not reflected in the first quarter.
Okay.
So with the total expenditures, unfavorable by $3 million, large components, as I said, departmental, $3.9 million unfavorable to the fire department, $1.6 million unfavorable to the police department, and then $6.2 million favorable variance in the remaining 13 departments. Favorable variance of $6.3 in general charges, $3 million that fringe benefits personal services, and then $2.6 million in other. And now, transfers out are unfavorable by $10 million, that's offset with the ARPA program funds. Now, in regards to staffing, the adopted budget included 2,765 positions. At the end of the first quarter, 2,498 were filled, leaving a vacancy of 267, or almost 10% of the workforce. Now, staffing-wise, this is one of the most fully staffed times both for police and fire. So of the 812, 782 positions are filled with a vacancy rate of 30. Historically, at the end of the first quarter, it's usually between 65 and 85. So that's a significant investment there. And as I said, the second class that's currently in the academy, I believe middle of the third quarter, they'll be out in the field for their training. And mid-summer, they should be able to be assigned on their own to be deployed.
Do we have any idea of how many people are reaching age 55 in retirement age? So we have this big class coming in. Are we expecting
That number has actually been diminishing, and I want to say
Yeah.
between 20 and 25 FTEs. I do have that in my report, so I can circle back on that. Similar numbers in the fire department that hit the 55 in 30 years. The fire department only has a vacancy of 21 firefighters, less than 3% at this time.
So apparently that answers the question of the concern that I have, where comparatively speaking to prior years, these numbers are pretty favorable.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say that to your question
Yeah.
earlier, at my 12, 13 years, I don't recall us ever being that close to fully staffed
Yeah.
in either of those departments.
I didn't mean to be premature on the
Yeah,
question.
no, I think we
That
don't
really
recall us
does
ever
answer
being
it.
that
I
close.
mean, and as much as in prior years, it's been, 3 times that.
Oh, easily.
Vacancies.
Yeah.
Both departments normally would carry between a 10 to 12% vacancy rate throughout the year. So the investment has been made in public safety this past year.
Yeah, so the public safety issue is moot. In other words, that's everything's fine.
Application of resources.
Yeah.
Okay, so, kind of gathering all what Bryce talked about, I kind of boils down to 2 different, like, 2-step approach, I guess is what I'd call. So the first is, the adopted budget included the use of 14.9 in available fund balance, which we know is not available. 3.6 million is available. So there's a beginning shortfall in the budget, an unfunded shortfall of 11.3 million. Next slide. Thank you. And I asked Bryce to update the schedule that we provided when we analyzed the financial plan for the budget year, for the potential overestimated revenues. So this is updated based on what has happened over the last quarter that we're comfortable with adjusting. Really the big change here is half of the casino revenue that was budgeted for the year was received as an advance from the state. So pulling apart these potential overestimated revenues, there's 2 lines where we're confident that the revenue is not going to materialize, and that's occupancy tax, which we already talked about, and cannabis enforcement fines. That was something that was placed into the budget, new item this year, but it requires certain acts of local laws to be passed, and that has not occurred. So we're finding when you add those 3 components together, there's a budget shortfall of 17.5 million to be addressed through a budget modification. I'll leave that alone, then I'll move on to the second bucket. Looking at the second bucket is what's left over, so to speak, that could be overestimated. Half of the 11 million that was budgeted for casino revenue, we included as potentially overestimated. We don't know if the state's going to advance that. We saw the article yesterday that possibly stalls again between the states and Seneca Nation. The cannabis tax continues to come in slow. No fault of the city, it's just slow. Across the state, parking meter fees, some of the attempts to change the fee structure was unsuccessful. So that number actually has been bumped up from where we estimated it at June, when we meant to talk about this. Traffic violation fees, on the other hand, have been brought down. We were estimating those a bit higher, but based on collections, we brought that estimate down. So the total potential revenue shortfall is approximately $10 million, just based on these categories that we highlighted as potential issues. So now, these two findings, it ties into the draft resolution that was provided to you, which requires the BFSA Board of Directors is required to, in the event that you're aware that there's a budget, unbalanced budget, there needs to be a budget modification. So that addresses this in 2 buckets. The first is the 17.5 million that's identified. That was the shortfall in the fund balance, the occupancy tax, and the cannabis enforcement fines. This is requiring a modified budget to address those items. The second is a recommendation that the budget be further modified for the 10 million shortfall that's on that schedule in front of you today. The timing that's been included in this resolution is a bit longer than what we typically provide, but it's January 31st, but it takes into consideration the fact that there's substantial changes in the administration, raised new to the position. Mayor Campbell just took over, and also it will allow for 6 months of expenditures to be able to better predict where your savings will be in the expenditures that can possibly offset some of the 17.5 million. As well as, I think we're going to be talking about ARPA. Maybe there's something that would offset that with the ARPA as well. So that's the, that kind of summarizes this resolution and our general findings in terms of where we're at. Any questions?
I think we've known that this, some version of this, maybe not with the numbers, was coming. We've been talking about a number of these issues since, the last 6 to 8 months about trying to put this all together, and now the time's come to be able to do that. And it's not like we haven't asked other organizations to put together a gap plan or put together a modified budget to be able to do that. That doesn't mean that we think that things are necessarily going in the wrong direction, but that this needs serious attention to be able to put us back on a favorable place where we can be and the city can be comfortable with moving forward and making good decisions. So I think that's just something that we're here for, and hopefully we're doing a good job and a good service for the city in pushing some of these things together. So, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Fred. There's not much sugarcoating with this, right? There's this financial situation, and I'm not here to try and paint it to be something that it's not, both for the current fiscal year or the out years. We have concerns, we have challenges ahead of us. Sitting down with Ray, sitting down with our team, we're formulating a plan to address it. The modified budget won't be a problem. We'll put something together and get it to you in January at some point. We're looking at, as I mentioned, the vacancy control measures, discretionary spending freezes, overtime. We're looking to address overtime in a couple of different ways. You referenced the American Rescue Plan dollars. I think there will be some available to us for revenue recovery, just some of the stuff that the administration wasn't able to get out the door that I think we could use for revenue replacement, things of that nature. We'll be talking to, I've already spoken to the leadership of the council today and yesterday. Was going to talk to the finance chair after this meeting, but he's obviously sitting behind me, and talk to my other colleagues in the council. One thing we want to do moving forward is making sure that we're working collectively. Obviously, we're all in this together, and we're going to be as transparent with the council and my other colleagues in government, as transparent as possible, communicate as much as we can with them moving forward. I think you saw with the capital budget and the capital process working together in a different manner than probably in the past. So all of us working together to address this. There's going to be no funny games with our numbers. We're going to be transparent, straightforward, and to the point that you made, Fred, about being serious with this. Not only are we serious about the current fiscal year, but obviously the out years. And my most recent recent cabinet meeting, I instructed all the departments to come back this year, their budget request with a 10% reduction. So it's something that we're taking very serious.
And we appreciate all the hard work, and we know how hard this is going to be. And we want to extend our hand out to say that we want to be as much of a part of the process as you want us to have, whether that's with the council or the mayor's office and the cabinet, or anything else that we can do to be able to aid in all of this. I mean, I think our most important point is to get us back to a good place so that the city can move forward. And I think we can do this and we don't need to have any kind of hysterics and things, that there need to be knee-jerk reactions to things that maybe some people out in the community have sort of pushed. I think we're moving in the right direction, and we want to be part of the solution here at the control board, and we'll do whatever we can to help you.
Yeah, we have the challenges we have in front of us, right? There's no hiding from them, so we're gonna use those as an opportunity to become more efficient, more cost-effective, or cost-efficient, become more effective, and, do everything we can to tighten our belts over the city.
Okay. Do we need to stop? Are we not on, or?
This laptop is having issues.
Is that the?
Restarted. It's not broadcasting. Larry made that.
Are we still on, though?
Yeah, I'm still recording, do you want to
So I'm just wondering whether or not we can call a vote while this happens, or whether or not we have to wait. Okay, no problem. I just want to make sure we're.
In the meantime, I had a question. I think probably it stems more from the nuanced differences regarding like fund balance designations with the county. How does the $50.7 million for the committed emergency stabilization fit into all this? I mean, generally speaking, the county,
Yeah.
our rainy day fund is our unassigned fund balance. So seeing that there is a committed and unassigned fund balance is
It's different.
is different. So is that something that's gonna be part of the equation? I assume that requires some sort of special supermajority vote of the council to utilize, or how does that work?
And they have to pay it back within 3 years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it does require some sort of, I don't think it's a majority.
Well, because ours, any use of unassigned fund balance requires a supermajority vote of the legislature.
Okay.
So that's already a pretty strict,
Mhm.
utilization.
Yeah, I don't think they have that provision at the city level. They do require council vote for it. They never put in, there was a request to have fund that, well, they do have a fund balance policy.
Yeah.
Does that include rainy days?
So I must feel like Bernie Sanders went out. I wrote the damn thing. We do the unassigned, so I remember, Fred, I don't have you read my resolution, when I was there, that was wonderful. I remember when,
Thanks for that.
the former mayor beat me up for it, but we used $14 million of this year to balance our budget. And we actually had to use it for a previous balance, thank you, Mr. Manfred, for telling me. We actually do have that in our unassigned. Council members view the emergency stabilization fund as like something catastrophic. We act like it doesn't really exist because it's truly catastrophic.
Okay.
But we, as you know, Mr. Nosworthy was very honest and transparent, that we used, the $14.9 million that we budgeted for this year's budget, we actually used to close out last year's budget.
Yeah, the city almost hurts itself a little bit in the sense of,
Yeah.
it makes it seem as though you have no fund balance, but you really have $51 million in fund balance. You just have it hidden, behind two
We have
locks
two
instead of one
locks.
lock.
Yeah.
And you have the restricted, which in many cases can be moved around as well, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would tell you, from my standpoint,
Mhm.
somebody's gonna be preparing the next budget, the intention to use it is not there.
Mhm.
It has to be a serious
Right.
situation. Yeah. I mean, that has not come up once in our conversation.
We're not.
So Ashley, how much do you have in unassigned available fund balance to use towards that budget?
3, right?
The 3.2.
Well, it can be all gone.
It's all gone.
But that's, yeah, there's other obligations that need to be paid.
Yeah.
That'll
But
be-
they're committed.
Which is why I reported the 40.
Some are artificially high.
Yes.
Not include that big retro payment.
Right.
Last year for the police contract.
Yeah, I mean,
It jumped a lot year to year.
I think
You know,
I mean, one of the things we have to be careful is to come back to trend, where if we have one-time budget items that could, particularly with ARPA dollars, that were gonna help us in the future, not to penalize everybody and not to overreact to that as well.
You actually, in regards to the big bump this past year in the committed due to the retro, a few years ago, you did see the committed decrease year to year because there was a labor several labor contracts that went out, artificially increased it in 1 year, following year, total expenditures decreased, you know, it's calculated based on 30 days.
The large legal judgment, is that bonded out yet, or is that part of, in here? It's all gonna be bonded out?
No, the new one is not going to be bonded out.
Okay.
That's
What was
the.
your original one?
Right.
Yeah, that's
Which one?
the new 9 million.
Oh, the two or three.
Yeah.
But the big
The $40
$40 million
That was
bond.
fine.
That's,
And now we've got another $9 billion, but that's not.
$9 million.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. We'll go, okay. Welcome back, everybody. We had a technical glitch for those of you that are watching, on Zoom. We apologize. Are there any more discussions on the resolution? If not, I'll call for a motion for a vote.
So moved.
Second. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Our next item is to discuss the status of the ARPA with Mayor Scanlon. As we are aware, the U.S. Department of Treasury requires all funds be committed by December 31st, 2024, and they be dispersed by December 31st, 2026. A recent schedule of ARPA funding and its status has been submitted under tab 4 of your board book. Bryce, would you like to just give a few comments before we ask the mayor to respond?
Absolutely. We do have a slide in the deck, page 33. And so the schedule is as December 2nd, 2024. As a reminder, the federal government awarded $331.4 million to the city of Buffalo. As of December 2nd, $291.5 million of that has been obligated, with the further $235.5 of that obligation being dispersed. So approximately 12.3% of funding allocated for programs, services, revenue replacement, capital projects have not yet been obligated. So that's equivalent to $40.8 million. As everyone's aware, these dollars must be obligated by December 31st, 24, and then expended by December 31st, 2026.
Okay. Mayor, would you like
Yeah,
to respond to all of this?
Yeah. So obviously, just took on the role of mayor in October, so one of the first things we did, we wanted to take a look at the ARP, obviously, coming up against the end of the year deadline for obligation for the fund. So we enlisted an outside auditor to review the program in its entirety. They're finalizing some of those numbers today, tomorrow. We should have a very clear picture. I know it talks about $40 million that's not obligated. It's nowhere near that. It's probably somewhere more around half of that. Again, we'll have a much clearer picture today, tomorrow. But again, I think it's going to look somewhere around 15, 18, 20 million instead of the projected 40 million that they were talking about. The team in administration and finance, different departments in the city of Buffalo, worked incredibly hard in the last few weeks to try and get some of the money that wasn't obligated out the door to those agencies that have been waiting on it. So I want to commend them on the work they've been doing to get the money out to those agencies who've been working on it, or waiting on it.
Can I ask you a question? So, is that anticipated unobligated money, would that have to go back to the council and then be reallocated for revenue replacement?
So we need a council approval to be sent back for revenue. Correct.
Then somewhere around 20 million.
15 to 20, somewhere around there, yeah.
I'm glad we're getting money out to agencies and other things, but given your fund balance issues and your deficit issues, I think looking at this seriously to help fill at least part of the gap has to be part of the solution going forward to allow you to have the room to be able to do that. And we're more than willing as the control board, although I shouldn't speak for everyone, to help work through any numbers, because I know you've only got a couple of days because we have to get this through council. So if there are any questions or any issues that we can help you with to try to do this, because I would hate to see $20 million go back to the federal government, you know, that we don't use. And as I sort of said before, for those agencies who, for whatever reason, and I don't think we can blame anybody, but maybe couldn't put everything together to be able to get this obligated, we can still look forward and look at those projects and figure out a way to fund them. But we'll never be able to do that if we lose the $20 million here. It'd make it incredibly hard. So I hope the agencies and the community sees that this is the only way that we can ensure that a lot of the things that they want to see happen, is for us to take this money back now.
Well, Chairman, I think the obvious question is whether or not we anticipate any pushback from the Common Council as to authorizing this revenue replacement plan if we use ARPA funds.
Thank you for that question. Well, so, I have the unique, perspective in the room where those community organizations will come to council members to appeal, to do an emotional appeal and say, you won't see this in your neighborhood, you won't see this, we already spent the money, you said you were gonna reimburse us. Because honestly, and this is just my feeling, but I happen to be truthful, I think that getting the money out, from the previous administration has been a debacle, and we oftentimes have to deal with that. I certainly, in a second-term council member, am tough enough to say, we gotta make payroll, we gotta provide services. I'm sorry that your organization, can't get this money, but we're in, I don't, in that as ginger as Fred when I say about the problems, I think we're gonna hit a serious wall. And so I think that my vote in being the chairman would be to say, hey, we have to reallocate this to operate the city. I think the majority of council members are there, but you are gonna get, as council members, our job is to represent our district and hear those emotional appeals. So you're gonna get some of that on the common council, but to be responsible as the chairman of the finance committee, I believe that that's the most responsible thing to do is to keep the city operating.
Do you think you got the vote?
There's a majority leader, but I got a whip on.
Yeah, and if I can chime in, I started having conversations with council members about the situation, letting them know where we stand. Certainly, we don't want to give any of this money back to the federal government. We can use it for its allowable uses. But one thing I want to be very clear about, we are very well aware that this is not a long-term fix to the budget, obviously. It can serve as a bridge while we structurally address the budget. It is not a long-term fix. Again, I hate to harp on this. I've only been there 6-7 weeks, but my approach to this is, I know this is not a long-term fix. If it can serve as a bridge, fantastic, when we structurally address the budget. But I think you see a different level of communication between the second floor and the council in the last 2 months, and we'll continue to do that. I've had conversations with council members already, and I don't want to try and speak for them or how they may or may not vote, but I feel comfortable that we will not get this money back. And when it comes to I am very aware of how some of this can fall into the laps of council members, 12, 13 years there, still represent the South District as well. The good thing is the RFA program that we went through, there's only one organization that won't get money through that program as of right now, and it's simply because we haven't received their documentation.
And I will just say, if you're having community groups in and you want the secretary of the control board to be there to
I'm
take
going to
questions.
use your comment on a flood of people in my office.
I am more than happy to do that, and if that helps move all of this along, then I'm very proud of my comments, as we go forward with everything.
I just want to make a point that, from the county's perspective, I've already reached out to Ray. We have a conversation tomorrow where I'm sort of lending some of my assistance. I've spent way more time than I would care to admit reading through, the arcane language of the final rule and all the frequently asked questions. I have a couple ideas on, how you might be able to obligate some of these funds en masse. But to the sort of point right now is, at least to some of these community groups, if they don't have encumbered dollars right now, it's right now, use the money. So they're probably not getting that money anyways, and, there's probably blame in a lot of places for why that happened, but you all are where you are right now, and you have to make the right choice to spend, obligate that money the way you can, and contracts take a long time to draft up and get executed.
And I want to thank you and the county executive for your willingness to assist us, take a look at things. We'll take fresh sets of eyes on things whenever we can get them, so thank you for that.
Great. Any other comments? Our last city agenda item is to review of the City of Buffalo's 2025 capital budget and capital plan. This item was approved yesterday by Common Council with some minor modifications to the original submission. I want to thank our staff, particularly Bryce, for working diligently and getting all of this information to us today. Bryce, you're up for a third time.
All right, thank you. So the 2025 capital budget was submitted on November 1st, 2024, and included three distinct components. And actually, before I get through this, the amendments are reflected in some of the later slides. So the budget was adopted yesterday with amendments, and my talking points will address them. So the capital budget was submitted on November 1st, 2024, and it included three distinct components. First one is the city's annual borrowing. So that consists of $27.3 million for the capital budget, with a proposed bond sale of $28 million. The comptroller's cap this year is $28 million. The second component was a $54.5 million capital request from the Buffalo Public School District. Per the district, these projects are reimbursable up to 97% by New York State, and Buffalo Public School District will cover 100% of the bonding cost. And then the third component is the bond anticipation note ban in the amount of $27 million. The ban proceeds will be reimbursed by either the federal or state government, with the city's cost being the cost of issuing. So as stated, the 2025 capital budget includes $27.3 million citywide projects, as well as $1.2 million in previously authorized but unissued projects, for a total of $28.5 million. Now, this could be broken down. The financing that will be requested in the amount of $28 million consists of $26.8 million that's in the 2025 capital plan, plus the $1.2 million previously authorized but unissued to get to the full $28 million. Now, the amount of authorized but unissued projects estimated after this is $14.9 million. The beginning balance was $15 million. There's $1.2 million of this previously authorized unissued included in the 2025 capital borrowing request. The remaining balance of $14.9 needs to be provided beyond the current plan. There still remains $500,000 in budgeted unauthorized projects. Resolutions for those projects would have to be drafted by December 31st, 2024, or they no longer are included. So we have a breakout of the adopted capital budget here, as well as projects to be sold, and then the amount to be authorized or unissued. Getting cut off there. So in total, $27.3 million was included in the capital adopted budget. Largest components, what I put in the bucket of engineering. That's going to be the infrastructure, the streetscaping, the street traffic lights. Full amount that's to be sold. Next component is police and fire at 3.1 and $3 million respectively. This includes improvements or engineering work at various police and fire stations, as well as the police purchase of vehicles, be it a fire engine or more police vehicles. There is $500,000 included for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Buildings, citywide owned buildings is budgeted at $2.6 million. Cultural organizations will be receiving $2.7 million. DPW and the vehicles, $2.7 million. Combined $1.6 million for the demolitions, citywide demolitions and tree removal planning. And then parks, the adopted capital budget included $1.2 million. They're only looking at bonding $800,000 this year, so there's going to be $400,000 that will be moved to the authorized but unissued to be issued in future years.
Do you know, is there a general theme to the, that 14.9 million of authorized but unissued projects? Like why they were authorized but not issued? Are they long-standing and just?
Some of them go back to 2016. I do have a discrete breakout of all those
Okay.
projects I can circulate after this.
I'm just
I
curious.
normally include that as an attachment to my report, but just due to the type of borrowing that was proposed and timing, we kind of held off to see what was actually approved. I do have the detail, and it's anywhere, there are still some fire trucks on there, there are improvements to the zoo. It's
Is it safe to say that
Raw.
some of that will never be issued, right? It's just a change of mind over the years and it's just.
Well, to follow up on your observation there, I was just curious as to whether or not there's been any initiative either on the part of the previous administration or the council to rescind or request to rescind some of these unissued projects, or, you know.
Because it remains
Yeah.
authorized in
They authorize
perpetuity,
and
right?
unissued. I mean, I think that there should be an analysis of what projects will unlikely be bonded, and therefore just get them off the table.
Yeah, we, as part of a conversation we had with the Comptroller's Office, the local public schools council last week, this topic came up, so we're gonna have a conversation about what we do actually clear up the roads.
Yeah.
Then this pie chart is the full 28 million that's been requested for financing by category. Largest one, of course, will be the infrastructure at 10.3 million, followed by 7.4 million for vehicles and safety equipment. Citywide buildings at 3.9 million, investment in economic development and cultural is at 3.8, 1.6 million for the demolition and tree management, and then parks for $1 million. So that's how the 28 million is being dispersed that they're looking at borrowing. Then the next two slides are historical snapshots. So the first one, we're looking at the City of Buffalo's capital borrowing levels going back to fiscal year 2019. You'll see in 2019, 2020, the city issued bans, which really impacted 2021 because that's when the bans were responded. But then, since then, you can see increases annually to the, last year borrowing was 27 million, this year it'll be 28 million. And just for note of record, City of Buffalo has not borrowed on behalf of the school districts in 2012. And prior to that, it was annually for $4 to $5 million. And then this slide here is a look back at the outstanding bond proceeds as of October 31st. Now, these are bond proceeds that are not encumbered or dispersed. So you can see the last 2 years, this was a significant amount, 7.7 from fiscal year 23, and then 8.2 million for this past year. So the total bond proceeds are 23 million outstanding, 23 million outstanding bond proceeds.
Bryce, I want to thank you for that information because that was one of my lead-in questions relative to over the years how much do we have in unexpended bond proceeds, which, by the way, gives you an idea as to whether or not we have the capacity to spend that money that's been issued. And of course, like I said, I'll save my questions to the end, but you gave me an answer to one of my questions that I wanted to address. Thank you.
And I guess tagging onto that, how much the COVID has changed how that was all done, and whether or not we're going to move back to a new normal, or whether or not this is a systemic problem.
Oh, and also, of these outstanding proceeds, what of these are attributable to, genuinely dormant capital projects that, for wonderful reasons, ended up being completed under budget, and that can be used to pay, future debt service based on, whatever the bond covenants are, or if those projects have been completely wrapped up, those can just be generally used for debt service. Well, one of the tricks we always try and use is comb as many capital projects and find a few $1 million to subsidize our, current year debt service as best as possible.
Well, my other concern is, you know, with the adoption of a $110 million capital budget program, with the expected or anticipated cost savings budget members or measures that the administration and the council, you know, have to employ based on vacancies, control, and retirements, you know, will the city actually have the capacity to spend those $110 million in bond proceeds? I mean, that's one of my concerns, because structurally, you know, they have to, you know, we saw where previous, 14 or 12 or 11 other divisions are counting on vacancy control for budget savings. What does that do then to the ability to process or, you know, proceed with doing the projects of $110 million? So that was just, you know, whether or not we have the capacity to spend that $110 million. So that was one of my other observations, that, you know, we're going to be cutting, you know, there's anticipated cuts for budget saving measures. What will that do to the ability to process the expenditures of this, you know, bonds? That's the way they go.
And then all you're doing is increasing your debt service and causing your...
In other words, you're borrowing money that people are paying debt service on for projects that aren't being built.
And that doesn't mean that the projects themselves aren't great projects.
No.
It's just that we don't have the capacity at this point to be able to do them, and then we need a different timeline to discuss that. And that's looking at, you know, a capital budget over 3 or 4 or 5 years,
as opposed to
one, looking at when you can put those projects in to be able to do those. Yeah. Sorry, Bryce?
We'll move into the summary of the adopted. Now, the capital budget and capital improvement plan excludes the ARPA recovery funds. They're being monitored internally by the city as well as by the BFSA. As of November 1st, when I put the schedule together, the city had approved approximately $105.5 million for various capital programmatic investments. Majority of the allocation estimated $72.5 million remains as November 1st, 2024, with the plan to be dispersed over the next 2 years. As everyone's aware, they must be obligated by December 31st, 24, and dispersed by December 31, 26. Administration is currently reviewing these projects to determine if they will meet the obligation deadline, and resources to be allocated, as was discussed earlier. And then this is a snapshot of these projects and what is remaining. That $72.5 million is really 2 out of the 40.2 and 32.3. So it includes the parks allocation, Shoeshone Sports Complex, Johnny B. Wiley allocation, cultural investment. So moving on, the district was included for $54.5 million. District has been using savings from the refunding of the JFCB debt. This is their request for a bond sale this year. Bonding for ongoing general operations included $1 million for tree removal and planting, $600,000 for demolitions. Uses of the limited bonding capacity. You know, the $1.6 million included in 2025 represents 5.7% of the total of the $28 million, and then that's an additional $2 million for demolitions in the 5-year capital plan beyond the current year. The BFSA recommends that a funding plan be established to determine when those projects that have been authorized and not currently funded may proceed. Projects totaling $14.5 million have been approved with no funding identified over the next 5 years. BFSA continues to recommend that tree trimming and planting be moved from the capital budget to the general fund, and we also recommend the Buffalo School District should develop a 5-year capital plan. This will be the end of the capital budget review.
How are we doing? Anyone else have any discussion points?
I just,
Yes, go ahead.
getting back to the authorized budget, of this $110 million in capital budget, projects. What projects have been identified that would generate the type of matching, county, state, and federal matching grants?
For the band.
No, this is for the over 110 million total.
When, there's the 27 million for the
27
band
for the band.
that's
Yes,
directly related
There's
to.
27, yeah, okay, there's a $27 million ban.
Those projects include,
So that's the 8 component.
So what I guess I was asking is, how does the issuance of $27 million in bond anticipation notes generate $200 million of outside funding?
it's the money that we have to front as federally funded projects. You're talking about Jefferson Avenue infrastructure project, Bailey Avenue, Middle Main, car sharing Main. These are all $10, $15, $50 million projects.
Have there been any discussions with various state and federal agencies that they're ready to deliver these historic new resources? I mean, we talked to anybody at the federal and
They've
state
been
level?
appropriated, they're waiting.
Yeah,
We
have the money.
This isn't critical, I'm just
No.
trying to get a handle
No, these
on,
projects are already funded.
so they're already funded?
Yeah,
They were
Okay.
waiting on the city. These
this is just our
bans,
fronting the money.
bans are really only for the engineering and architectural services for the large part, so they can kick it off and then do the actual.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that then there has been a commitment then
Yeah.
to match those funds on the $27 million bond anticipation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It may seem like I'm not fiscally conservative, but with a $110 million capital budget, I actually am. Those projects are already federally funded, and that's just our component of it.
All right,
Yeah,
I want to go back to the Buffalo Public Schools.
yeah, okay.
Is anybody from the Board of Education submitted their capital projects budget to the State Department of Education?
Their CFO's on.
Oh,
Would you like me to answer that question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
that would
sorry.
be great.
yeah, have you guys had any discussions with the Board of Education, the State Department of Education, that would somewhat guarantee the 97% reimbursement on those expenditures?
Yes, we have 27 projects, specific projects. The first one and the largest one is 24 million for the Buff State Da Vinci renovation.
That is exactly the project I was curious about. Are
It
they
seems
on
like,
board with, are they on board with a 97% reimbursement on the movement to Buffalo State Buckham Hall?
yes, and it's a little bit different than the other projects. Because the scope of this project, they do what's called a maximum cost allowance. So we've gotten the construction documents 99% complete. We do our construction estimates. You know, it'll be in the $34 million or so range. The state has already preliminarily committed to $24 million. That's the amount we put into the capital budget for bonding. So that one is dollar for dollar. The district has always said we'll pay the $10 million above the aidable amount.
Okay.
All of the other projects, every project, school districts are assigned a building aid ratio. Ours is 97.3%. So I've submitted that to numerous people, and it's guaranteed by the state.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm whether or not you did have some guarantees or reimbursement authorizations from the state that they will come through on the promised reimbursement rate.
So, no, I understand. We've also clearly communicated to everyone the time frame for these projects. All 27 of those projects have to have final construction documents submitted to New York State Ed by January 1st. The state takes 8 weeks to review, stamp, and give the final official building aid calculation. So that's by March 1st. That is more than enough time for myself to work with the underwriters, bond counsel, etc., to include them in the bond. We provide weekly updates, whatever. First of all, if I could take a quick step back and comment on the mayor and his capital budget. I want to say thanks to the mayor for including the BPS projects in his capital budget. I think it's bold, forward-looking, and low risk. I really do. Now, and here's another reason why it's low risk, and I've been communicating this. Whatever projects don't meet that schedule we have with the state, they're not bonded for. So why we're asking for $54 million, that's if we get 100% success rate on working our way through these final steps. We're only going to borrow what we get 97.3% for.
Thank you.
And you'll find that out in March?
Yes, but we'll have very good indicators along the way. And we're working with state ed. They're working on the same schedule we are.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think this does bring up an important point that while we're talking about bonding 110 million, this is fundamentally different from what we've done in years past.
Yeah.
Because of the change in the way bonding is taken, and now that the city must bond for the school district. We're going back to an older thing, so we need to realize that and not have people overreact to a large number.
Thank you.
I think depending on how you look at it, it's either a perfect or imperfect storm of things, right? We have our annual capital budget. We have the timeline with the projects that could be jeopardized if we don't move forward with the ban in the early second quarter of next year. And then the fact there's the discontinuation of the Joint Schools Construction Board, where the schools are now, we have to borrow on behalf of the schools. One thing we're going to do is engage our partners at the state to ask them to re-engage that Joint Schools Construction Board so the schools can borrow on their own.
All right, well, this is my position on it. If it's already assumed that the state's going to reimburse 97% of all your capital projects for the board, for the education, why would you even want to have a Joint Schools Construction Board?
Yeah.
I don't know what the benefit would be. So, I mean, that's my observation. And my second observation is, regardless of what is approved in the way of a capital budget, it's still the responsibility of the city controller to make a determination as to how many bonds they want to issue. So.
Spoken as the former controller.
Yeah, so, but no, they can authorize a $110 million capital budget, but still, the controller has the authority to determine how much they want to issue. So that may require further discussions on the part of the council and the mayor. So
Correct.
that's why I let that know.
Yes. Great. Yeah. Okay.
We're gonna jump for the building review.
Sorry, I have 3 o'clock that I understand probably have.
You can say,
We won't be able to get your quorum.
We lost our.
we've lost.
We lost the vote anyway.
Wait, are there any more votes?
For me, I'm right.
Yeah, there are,
Oh, okay.
well, wait a minute, we have Ray.
I don't have a.
We
proxy
didn't
form.
get the letter from today, yeah.
Are there any other resolutions that need to be passed prior to?
There's one quickly, and I
Let's
can
go.
just jump to it.
Let's jump
So,
in. Let's just go through this.
for
Well, we still have a
Buffalo,
quorum.
while
Yeah.
we're still formed, so for the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency, there's a recommendation in our report. There's a lead hazard grant that expires in July of 2025. The recommendation that I'm asking the board to affirm by vote is that we get a written report to supplement the second quarter report, how those funds are going to be utilized. They got a 1-year extension. It expired in 2024. We just want to make sure those funds are going to be used and see what the plan is. So that's what I was asking.
Okay, so can I have a motion to that effect? So moved, second? Okay, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Jeanette's still on.
And we, yeah, Jeanette's still on, and we can get a letter.
We'll get it. Yeah.
So, you're good. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. We'll now, advance our agenda to the district items. Nathan, will you? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So now, just for those at home, while we have lost a quorum, we have no other official votes to do today, and this is for information purposes and discussion. If anything comes up that needs a vote, we will vote on that at our next regularly scheduled meeting. Nathan? Thank you.
Good. Good afternoon, everybody. I have two items here. The first is a review of final 23-24 financial results, and then after that we'll get into the first quarter. Firstly, this shows where the final budget ended in 23-24, what the actual revenues and expenditures were, and the variances between them. I'll get into that in a bit. Revenues were somewhat higher than budget, by 6.7%. And significantly, the variances were with non-property tax items, which is the county sales tax. It's favorable by $5.8 million, or about 111% of final budget. And point out that this was BFSA, it's almost a penny of what our forecast was for the year. Miscellaneous local sources was favorable by about $5.5 million, or close to 130% of budget. This is homeowners category, so they covered a lot of things. What drove that was probably mostly tuitions received by the Buffalo School District from sources. New York State aid was not significantly different than budget, but it's such a large category in and of itself, I point out the variance. Just $4.3 million. Expenditures were significantly less than final budget by $90.6 million. We'll get to that in a second. The budget included there was a budgeted deficit of $41.5 million, and the end of the year there was a budget surplus of $90.1 and an actual surplus of $48.6 million. What drove that on the expenditure side was instruction within regular schools of $35.4 million, particularly programs for children with handicapping conditions, regular school instruction, and instruction administration and improvement. General support was favorable by $31.5 million, particularly within central office services of close to $20 million. There's employee benefits of $10.8 million. Then pension, miscellaneous benefits, the overall active and retiree health insurance was slightly over budget. Transportation also ended favorably by $10.6 million. I'd point out there is that last year was one of the first true school years post-pandemic where things, the government made sweeping changes to transportation, and they have a new bell structure within the school district. It's not remote learning or anything like that, so it's really a post-pandemic type of school year. There's no questions about that. I'll show that the difference between the fund balance. Fund balance grew from $375.5 million to $424.1 at the end of the year. A $48.6 million increase year to year. Within assigned fund balance grew overall about $20 million. If you look at the top there, designated for the subsequent year, that is 24-25 school year, $83.5 million designated for the current school year's budgeted deficit. Then just a quick peek at where OPEB's at. We had discussed earlier.
This is a look back over 10 years. Year to year, the long-term valuation increased by 31 million for various reasons. We grew for the prior year, but we grew substantially years past. That's the end of the review from the last school year. Any questions about that, I can answer them.
Yeah, I mean, if they have a $180 million unassigned fund balance, why is there talk or discussion that they're gonna be laying off teachers?
Okay, and I'll discuss that a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
I can get into that in the quarterly review.
No, all right, I'm just looking at it in its present tenor there, that, they have a significant fund balance. I don't know what the percentage is, but certainly it's over and above what a standard, required fund balance would be on a GFOA basis or whatever, so. I'm just curious, because we're talking about eliminating teacher positions at a time when they certainly have enough money to support that.
We don't
Yeah,
know.
Especially since their savings on instruction of $35.4 million. I don't know how a special needs kid, is there a reduction of special needs kids, with handicap conditions that they save $8.4 million? I'm looking at the numbers as is, and I'm just, curious as to how they can generate all this savings.
It's a big part of the last school year was that they had $90 million in ARPA funding. So this is just the general fund result, and a lot of services were able to be covered with grant funding.
Okay.
So in other words, that's not the only answer, but that's a big
But the $180 million in unassigned fund balance includes, ARPA funding?
No, can't.
Yeah, well,
I'm not understanding, but they
could
in
have
other words,
they could have moved money from projects and then
Yeah.
have money left over for our, to go into unassigned, but they can't directly put the
Can't
money.
hear
in.
anybody.
No problem.
Oh, I'm just curious as to how the $180 million, I mean, they have a $424 million total fund balance.
Right.
$180 million of it's unassigned. How do you generate that sizable fund balance? I don't know where it's all coming from, so I'm curious.
And Nathan, do you know if they got dinged? I thought under
No.
state rule, the controller's rules, that their fund balance was only supposed to be 4%, or they had to spend it down. It may have been 6%, I don't remember the number, but it's something like 4 to 6%, and then of their budget, and then after that, they had to have a plan to spend their unassigned fund balance down. Do we?
No.
Yeah,
Were they dinged? Are they being told, were they put on a plan?
I can tell you right now that the 4-year financial plan includes, close to $200 million reduction in fund balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it built up over, the last few
Right.
years with all the foundation aid, ARPA funding, and next year at the 7.2% use of fund balance to expenditures.
Which translates into how much?
83.4 million.
Yeah, that's on the next page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to start the year, this was mentioned earlier, it's way too early to start forecasting, especially for the school district, because teachers are 2/3 of the employees, and they only had 1 month of instruction by the end of September. They typically work 10 months. The district is not saying any variances within revenues or expenditures on the whole. Revenues go up $12.6 million from over year to year, or 1.2%. Expenditures go up significantly by $141.1 million, or 14%. And we did discuss a lot of that when we reviewed the annual budget, but just a reminder that a lot of the programs, services, employees that were previously ARPA funded, about $45 million of which are now general fund funded. It is a structural deficit, and that number, 7.2% of expenditures, or $83.4 million. Some of the key findings, based on what I'm looking at, revenues are potentially unfavorable overall, but not by a whole lot. And it looks like sales tax, it's early in the year, but looks like they would be about or at if they were in the prior year, which would be a budget surplus. The budgeted amount is less than what was actually received in the prior year. State aid looks slightly less than budget. I don't think any of those are very significant, not a whole, but it's something that I noticed when I went through my review. Expenditures are potentially favorable overall. There's a low rate of vacancy, which would contribute to that, but there was also a budgeted use of $14 million in charter school tuition payments in the current year budget. This is to make up for special education services. Nice to say that's a good dollar amount, that's what you should hold for it, but ultimately it would not be paid in this year. So it's, for 24-25, the district will not pay that, but it will be paid at some point. And then the other key finding here is, for the first time in 10 years, the district enrollment is not just higher, but significantly higher than it was at the end of the prior school year.
I mean, what's the
What's that
explanation?
attributable to?
Yeah.
Jim and I talked about that. The high school enrollment is up significantly. That's a big part of it.
They don't know why. They
don't yet.
don't know why yet. There's some belief that homeschooling is reversing the trend to homeschool, and that kids are coming back into public schools. But it's all colloquial. There's no statistics pointing to say that it's what's happening at this time.
Well, do they know whether or not it's because we're a sanctuary city that more kids are going to public schools there?
It's possible. We don't know.
Do they keep any sort of statistics on the breakdown of student enrollment?
Well,
Jim might be able
Yeah,
to
Jim-
respond on that.
Jim, can you comment on your thoughts on the increase in enrollment and?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble following the conversation. I can't hear it. But our enrollments, they're finalized in January of each year, the beds counts. So they'll be lower than at the end of the first quarter, but we still will see an increase of 300 to 500 kids after 10 straight years of decline. Once we get that final number, we can really, really drill down into them, and we can provide our initial theory. I think part of it is just Buffalo is saturated. The charter schools and the Buffalo public schools, there's no increase in the population. And it was like, if you take a look at all the students, public, charter, and then private schools, it's like 42,000 kids flat. It's just they're being reallocated. And now I think the growth in charters is slowing, and they are returning to BPS. We are growing. There'll be an international component to that. There'll be, we have better SPED programs than everybody. There'll be that component, but we're definitely going to be up 300 to 500. We can provide a better breakdown in January. Great. And why you might think that's crazy, but you can't tell till January. The student population is also, it shifts during the first 6 months of the year. People who go to charters, they end up returning to BPS, etc. So, and we also have people who enroll after the beds date.
Where are you on your kindergarten, first grade? Do you know? Are you up there too?
We are up there as well. Kindergarten, not pre-K, but kindergarten. Yeah.
Right. There seems to be in the suburbs too, an increase in first grade. So it's good to see that it's also in the city. Thank you.
I see that you're keeping your out-year enrollment projections pretty much stable.
Yeah.
At the same time, instructional staff is being decreased. How's that gonna work?
We are tremendously overstaffed right now. We had lost 4,000 kids over 6 years, and our staff had grown by 400. I don't want to get into all the I don't want to get into all the reasons for that. But there is especially with the new BTF contract, there's an absolute need to begin, and we started last year, to begin right-sizing the district staff levels for the enrollments. And even after that, I'm sorry, but it isn't. Even after our class sizes are 21 after our reductions.
So we're looking at, if we look at your instructional staff, in 2015 you were at 3,400, and you're projecting in 2028 to go back to that?
Yes.
Okay. And how much of this has been because of COVID and the need for all of that? And then I guess the second question I have is, how are you calculating your staff given the increasing needs of special ed students, particularly those that are being mainstreamed into the classrooms?
Those are great questions that are at the heart of our budget process, our strategic planning. I do want to go back. Undeniably, our staff got out of line with our enrollments. Our first attempt at addressing that was in this current year's budget, but it coincided with the loss of $90 million in ARP ESSER. We had 400 staff funded through ARP ESSER. So I'll try to be as clear as I can. We cut 256 total FTEs, all vacancies, out of our budget. But the general fund FTEs increased by 152 because they were all previously funded through ARP. And then to address your questions, the majority of those were social workers, guidance counselors, security guards, etc., that were hired during the pandemic for learning loss and security, and the ARP funding ended. The second thing we did after cutting those vacancies was to take 36 what they call teacher on special assignments that do not have any direct contact with the teachers. We cut those positions and made them go back to the classrooms. There's still 180 of those positions.
Listen, my observation is, based upon the socioeconomic factors of students in the city, which is not comparable to suburban school districts such as Clarence, Williamsville, Orchard Park, East Aurora, you name it. You know, bringing down class size for our students would be much better, you know, if it shrunk down to something that is more conducive for helping our kids learn, as opposed to be in competition with the suburban school districts. So my thinking, and this is probably more personal, it's got nothing to do with the board. My thinking is, you know, reduction of instructional staff in a school district that has poverty levels, which is like the third most poverty level city in the whole country, that you would want to do everything you could to shrink the size of your classrooms, you know, and try to be competitive with these wealthier suburban school districts. That's where I'm going with this. I don't know about the guidance counselors and social workers and things of that nature. I think it's strictly about instructional staff. And if it benefits the students based on their poverty level, they have less kids in a classroom, that'd be something I would be more concerned about, and would try to do everything we could not to lay off teachers. Sorry about my rant, but, you know, just to say that, oh, it's down that they hired more students, or they hired more teachers and so forth. You know, the more teachers you have in a impoverished school district, the better it is for those students. So I would be very reluctant, or at least promote, you know, keeping as many teachers as you can to help educate these kids.
Thank you, and I understand, but the best person who can address this, nobody has the students' needs more at heart than our superintendent. There are no cuts planned that would ever hurt a child, greatly increase the classrooms. She's actually thrown in $83 million from our reserves this year to balance the budget in order to keep the teacher levels, in order to add the security guards, social workers, and guidance counselors. And I got to tell you, what we hear from our curriculum and building administrators, the social and emotional needs of especially the younger children I don't know if they can quantify it, but they're saying they're more severe than ever. So we've added all that staff there. Security, you hear that in every newspaper article. We've tripled the security staff. But the teachers in the classrooms, we cut vacant positions, and we cut TOSAs who had no direct role with the children. So we're very conscious.
All I'm doing is looking at your projected out-year enrollments, where it's over 29,500 students, and you're lowering the instructional staff by 300 or 400, whatever it is. That's all I'm looking. I'm just looking at what the script says. Is that I'm not betting at you. I'm just saying that based on what you're projecting, you're going to eliminate a couple hundred teachers and still keeping the enrollment at the higher level.
And I'm sorry, I put the 250 in the instructional staff for the 4-year plan. I did not put a finite breakout. And I don't know if this instructional staff includes the administrative group, of which these TOSAs and others are included.
Yeah, it does.
But I got to tell you, the TOSA thing, you could cut 180 TOSA positions that are not in the classroom. They got nothing to do with the children. And you could move them back into the classroom because we have that many vacancies. Budget's reduced, more people directly interacting with the children.
Jim, as a point of clarification, did the current year budget included eliminating 36, what you just mentioned, TOSA positions?
The current years, yeah, we did it.
The positions were eliminated. Those individuals were rehired as in-classroom instruction.
Correct, they were put in the classrooms.
Going out only, they were rehired. They're still active employees.
Well, based on what they have right now versus what they're projecting in 2028, that's almost 500 teachers, instructional. Like I said, I don't know what the composite is of instructional staff. I'm looking at them as being teachers. You're talking about eliminating 490 teacher positions in a school district that has a 3% poverty rate in the country? Come on.
Jim, question, the total positions are traditionally mentor teachers that are going in and helping younger teachers in the classroom, particularly with, difficult students. If I'm not correct, so then is there as you reduce those folks, is there a program to help new teachers, particularly given your turnover and the expected turnover, given your low salaries compared to those out in the suburbs?
Oh, our salaries are second highest in Western New York, first of all. That's not the problem.
Not
And
your
then
starting.
TOSA's, no, I like Andy, we've invested so much in this, by the inflection of my voice, I get excited, sorry. I apologize. The TOSA's, no, they're not even mentor teachers. They're taking data, making graphs. I can get you a full explanation for all 200 of those
No,
positions.
I'm just saying that traditionally, those folks out of the classroom were there helping younger teachers. If you're telling me that's not what you're doing, then
It's
I
not.
guess I understood what was going on in the city and would have hoped for years you've been actually mentoring teachers. But that's a different question.
There was another one. There was another part of your question. I'm sorry.
No, I think we're fine, Jim. And again, these aren't your decisions per se. You're here just answering questions from the rest of us. But I will tell you that, our former chairperson is now being truly represented by Andy, because Nils would have been all over this. Because I think our belief, and maybe it's starting to happen, is that the only way to really bring the city of Buffalo back is to have a great school district that people want to move into the city and stay in the city because their kids are getting a good education. And I am with you. I think the new superintendent has been a great addition and has really moved the school district forward after, I don't want to say a few years where maybe we've had some questions about that.
Yeah. Thank you. And there's another part of this, teacher, and I haven't broke it down so finitely. Let's just say all employees. On any given day, we have 450, and we're just going to say teachers out on workers' comp, medical leave, or administrative leave. Then we have another 400 to 500 that take off every day. We have an excess of bodies. And the most generous contract in Western New York for them. I'm not criticizing it. I'm trying to bring up these other factors to illustrate that our enrollment, we're doing everything we can to give every kid the best opportunity with direct instruction. And our class sizes are also amongst the smallest.
Well, just a point of information, Jim. You said they have the second best contract. How long has it been since they had a contract?
3 years. 3 years now?
3?
They're on the third year of their current contract.
No, but how long has it been since this contract got negotiated? How long was it prior to, did they not have a contract?
I wasn't heavily involved in a long time.
Okay. Listen, I apologize. My rant is not against you.
I know.
So
I know.
I want you to I'm holding you responsible, my friend.
I know that. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Nathan, do you have anything else?
Just to put a button on it, when we give our second quarter report, we should be able to make some fiscal year-end projections.
Jim, thank you for holding in there. Thank you for working with us on this. We always appreciate you coming through and answering the difficult questions, and you've never shied away from anything. And whenever we've asked for anything, you've always been there and you've worked hard, and we really do appreciate all the hard work you're doing. So
thank you. But I gotta tell you, I get more out of your feedback and your reports than almost any other source I have. I really appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Jim. We appreciate it. We'll now move on to the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency, which has 2 agenda items, including a brief review of the 2024 audited financial statements and the first quarter report. Bryce?
One moment.
And I know we already voted on it. If there's anything else we just needed to add, otherwise we can skip on.
On the quarterly?
Yeah.
I don't believe there's anything else really on the quarterly. At the end of the financial statement, I can just, a few closing comments on that. So, we're reviewing the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency's 2024 financial statements. Fund balance as of June 30th, 2024, total fund balance was 10.4 mil. Actually, before I jump into this, the audit was an unmodified opinion, it was clean, there were no findings for the, so, really good job on wrapping this up. So, total fund balance at year end was 10.4 million. Of that, 9.6 million was for the general fund. 4.5 of it is non-spendable, 1 million is unassigned, and that was a decrease of $285,000 year to year. Under the CDBG fund, almost 70,000 that's non-spendable, that's a decrease of 27,000, almost 28,000 year to year, and that really represents real estate held for sale. And then non-major funds combined, 700,000, and that's all received. This graph compares total expenditures at the fund level between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 23. There was an increase of almost $3 million in total between the two. The largest component of this is going to be the federal grant expenditures, which totaled $61.5 million in the most recent year, compared to $56.1 million. So almost, well, increased 5.4 million year to year. Largest component being the Section 8 housing. That increased by 7 million year to year. That's really a pass-through for Bureau. Still having a program there. CDBG expenditures were relatively flat year to year, decrease of 100,000. CDBG CV expenditures decreased year to year by 1.5 million, but that's more to how the projects are paid out. The contractors have to file the paperwork to get it down, so it's more of a timing issue. And then the home program increased year to year by $1 million. And those are all federal funds. So there's a year-to-year increase in federal grant revenue of 5.4 million. I already went through a lot of that. That increase is 7 million in the public service and human service programs. That was with Section 8. If I'm going too fast, please just tell me. Okay.
Is it in our book?
No, these slides.
Okay, all right. I just want
fell out.
to
No,
what's going on.
I apologize for that, but we can get those out to you later. There was a year-to-year increase of 65,000 in rehabilitation and preservation activities. Home programs increased by $1 million. CDBG and general fund expenditures decreased by 900,000, and then all the non-major funds increased by 27,000 on that basis. Year-to-year decrease of 1.4 million, almost 21% for planning, management, and administration activities. Quick snapshot of the OPEB. From a measurement perspective, the peak was June 30, 2011 at 28.7 million. They're down to 6.5 million. What's really driving that is participation, because Bureau runs usually 12 to 20% vacancy, and over the years they'll have somebody come in for a short time and then leave. So their experience rate is decreased over the years.
But this is a federal pension system, right, or is this from the system?
This is through the state.
Oh, really?
They are
the ERS.
ERS. So, in regards to OPEB, they're in relatively good shape when you use that back. Just a few comments. The formalized loan write-off procedures, recommendations following established policies and documentation. They still have the two financial accounting systems, so they're still trying to look for a proper way to bridge between the federal drawdown and munis. So there has to be a reconciliation between the two, and then interfund loans. So over the years, Bureau has really cleaned up some of these outstanding issues. The fines are minimal. If there's no questions on that, I can just, real quick on the first quarter for Bureau, only thing I really want to touch on there is really these additional federal dollars, which you can, this one is in the presentation. So if you go to page 61, that begins the presentation. All that slide does is it has a breakout of the year, program year 50 funds, annual allocation of entitlement funds from the government, and this is what the split is between the City of Buffalo and Bureau. And just an item of note, of the year 50 grants, they're only going to use about 300,000 from the home, and that's going to be strictly administrative. Everything else they've included in the current year for home is all prior year allocations. So they have quite a bit from years 47, 48, 49 still remaining, and they're trying to spend that down.
You know, this may be kind of an obnoxious question, but they don't receive any city revenues, and I just wanted to confirm that, right? Is there any city resources that go into the borough?
No. It's actually the reverse. There's charges for services Bureau pays the city. Outside of that, there's no resources.
Yeah, there's program income, repayment of loans that just get reinvested into the program, but.
I'm just curious as to why we're an oversight body over borough.
Well, that's another.
That's what I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Just, you know, there's no financial impact on the city's budget or so forth that, I mean, to me, it's, okay.
It has Buffalo in the name, so.
Yeah.
I think it was included in the,
No, it was.
no reason.
Of course, when they implemented this Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, they wanted to control everything.
Yeah.
They wanted anything connected with the city of Buffalo, whether it was relevant or not.
Yeah.
There was the power push.
Okay. Any last statements?
Just 33 out of 40 positions are filled, and Bureau has multiple funding sources that are time sensitive. So the big ones, CDBG, CARES Act, they have 1.5 million and 11.4 remaining that needs to be dispersed by January 6, 27. They have an allocation of 1.1 million from city ARPA funds, with only 600,000 left to be dispersed by December 31, 26. In addition, they received another 12.4 million in COVID funds, but it's through HUD, not Treasury. Those do not need to be obligated until January 1st, 27. And then the resolution that was discussed earlier was really for the lead hazard grant. They received an extension. They have until July 2025 to disperse the 1.3 million. Now, something they ran into a problem with when they originally received it, those funds could only be used for one census tract. They were really restricted to how they could, but now it's been opened up to citywide, and they expect the funds to be moving forward. However, just as a note, you keep seeing how more and more money is being moved to lead hazard remediation. I mean, county just received a grant for $7 million, so it may be a capacity issue is how many people are able to go out there and do this work. And that's really the takeaways for the Bureau first quarter I have.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. We'll move on to the last item of business, which is to review the Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority first quarter report and summary. Nathan, you're up.
Sure, thank you. So this table shows the consolidated adopted budget, the budget to date amounts, and the actual received, the total revenues from expenditures. The four components, the adopted budget included net operating income of $1.7 million before debt service, and then factoring in the principal payment on debt service and removing the non-cash OPEB accrual was $1.2 million. Consolidated budget is balanced overall. At the end of the first quarter, both revenues and expenditures were favorable as compared to budget to date. Looking at revenues, the areas where there were favorable variances or were within HUD areas, The operating subsidy that the AMP program receives is favorable, and then the Section 8 program also is favorable for housing, public housing assistance vouchers. Consolidated expenditures were favorable by about $1.3 million. There is a level of vacancy at BMHA. It's not very high, especially as compared to historic vacancies. It's about 14%. It usually bounces around anywhere from 10 to 20%. But because it's less than budget, there were variances. And then this table just breaks it out by union group and by department. 23 vacant positions at the end of the first quarter. Now, just to take a second to look at Marine Drive. Marine Drive's individual budget is not balanced. It has net loss of $200,000, or the cash impact of removing the non-cash hotel accrual was $400,000 negative. There's a slight variance at the end of the first quarter, and that's negative variance within total revenues. Marine Drive is very dependent on rental receipts, and that was unfavorable at the end of the first quarter. Marine Drive does not have operating reserves available to address budgetary deficits. BMHA intends to continue cash flow assistance from DOCC reserves, central office reserves, as needed, and to increase revenues through increased occupancy and a rental increase, which if approved goes through in no earlier than April of 2025. And the prior year Marine Drive expenses, fiscal year 2024 concluded with total Marine Drive expenses of $800,000 over total Marine Drive revenues, and that's unaudited. But overall, BMHA is operating within its budget, and we briefly went over those variances for, so I can answer any questions today.
So are they updating the rental units at Marine Drive? Are they trying to fix those to some extent?
There's ongoing maintenance and work within that. They're about, the last number I saw was that they're about 22% vacancy rate across. The big thing there is that they go to borrow in March or May of 2025. For the spring for the new Marine Drive.
Right. So, okay. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, this concludes the business portion of our meeting. I will now open the floor to anyone from the public that would like to address the board today on the matters we've discussed. Is there anyone
I don't
out
think
there?
there's anybody. Is there anybody on Zoom, Nikita? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing no one then, is there any other new business that board members would like to address? Hearing none, this concludes the meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.